Okay, great. Just give a few more minutes for everybody to jump on. While we're waiting just for more people to jump on in the chat, why don't you guys give me some recommendations for animated shows you're watching? Invincible. I haven't seen Invincible yet, or Infinity Train.
It's really good, but not a kid show.
That's what I hear.
Yeah, I just finished what's the robots one on Netflix? Love, Death, and Robots.
Oh yeah, that's got some really cool stuff in it.
Yeah.
Just recently, I watched. Did you guys ever see Over the Garden Wall?
Love that show.
Oh man, yeah, it's a great
One of the greatest of all time.
Oh man, I was I kind of wish that all the bigger studios would do more miniseries because I just think it's so fun to that see how
you get the full story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Awesome.
I will say that the latest Castlevania was good too. Season 4.
Okay. I just started getting into not so much shows, but watching anime movies, which I was ashamed that I had never done before. And so all the people at work were like, just go through Miyazaki first and then go from there. So I actually just saw Akira recently and I was super into that. I thought that was the coolest.
You should read it. It's beautiful.
Oh, is it a graphic novel?
Yeah, it's a graphic novel, and the best part about it is it's graphic novel. It's laid out. It's laid out almost like a storyboard.
Oh, cool.
Which is really nice. It actually inspired Alan Moore a lot into Watchmen and stuff like that because of how it was laid out. So every panel it's almost like movement in reading it.
Very cool. Awesome. I'll check that out.
Did anybody watch the Smiling Friends pilot? It's really I really enjoyed it. It just got picked up by Adult Swim, and they released the pilot April of last year, and I really loved it. And yeah, it's apparently coming before the end of this year.
Awesome. Okay, guys, I think we're at a good point where we can start. Okay, so first week we talked about basic picture editing, kind of what animatic editing is. Last week we went through sound effects. This week is going to be music. And so what I was saying to everybody before, I think somebody just jumped on, was it's crazy how, or it's really cool to see how sound affects the timing drastically, right? It helps you feel like things are feeling right. So we're going to go into music editing tonight. And it's an interesting thing because what we're doing here is we're doing temp music, right? We're pulling from online sources for royalty-free music. We're using scores from other movies, things like that, just to help it kind of build the feeling, get the right emotion in the scene. I was going to say, I put the clips again on the Google Drive folder. If you're having any stuttering issues or anything, you can go back and watch them. But to start off, I just want to talk about kind of the various scores that we're dealing with. So in any given movie, show, whatever, we're dealing with, and this is sort of a broad generalization of the way I've categorized scores. You have scores that are sort of story-based scores or characters in the movie, they're their own character. They make appearances, you recognize the themes. There's tonal stuff, where it's sort of just setting, it's sort of like Christopher Nolan, right? Setting sort of drones and just getting a feeling through sort of tonal ambient sound. And then you have like soundtrack, which is sort of like Martin Scorsese style, or Quentin Tarantino using pop songs or rock songs or country songs or whatever, you know. And I think you see that in animation a lot, like Cars as a whole, like original Sheryl Crow, Brad Paisley country rock thing. So those are kind of like what I've categorized them into. So I want to start just kind of by showing a couple examples of those. Today's probably the most I have live action, but it's not because we're transitioning out of animation. It's all going to help because like I feel like whenever we go into scoring, we're pulling a lot from live action movies. So first one I want to show, this is a very famous one that I think most people know, and just to kind of talk about score as like a story or a character. I think the best example of that is John Williams. So let's take a look at this. So famous scene, I'm sure most of you have seen this. Okay, so very much story based, right? This theme, this is the Force theme. This theme comes back in Star Wars continually. And it's sort of like this is the moment of Luke sort of with his future, right? So the score in Star Wars, I think, is what makes Star Wars. Not that Star Wars isn't a great story, but like I don't know it would have been as big as it was if it wasn't for John Williams' score, because that is an emotional score. And like it sticks in your brain so well. All of you could probably sing a lot of the Star Wars songs, you know. So in contrast to that, and this isn't necessarily a bad thing, I usually prefer the John Williams style of scoring with any medium. But I want to show another example of a really interesting scene and a very memorable scene recently. This is from the Joker, the recent Joker with Joaquin Phoenix. So let's check this out. To kind of notice the differences. Okay, so that scene, very unsettling scene. That was in the movie, the context of the movie, that scene is the Joker has just killed someone for the first time, right? And he panics, runs into a bathroom, hides, and has this solo moment. And that's sort of his transition moment from disturbed individual into cold blooded killer. So what's happening with the music there is it's isolated, it's an isolated cello, right? That's sort of, it's very like lonely, but also very eerie, and it's setting a tone. It's not really a memorable, singable moment. You're not going to be going around going, da, na, 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 na. I love that score. You know, it's like but it works for the movie and in the context of what's happening. So two things there, and then the third one, which I talked about, was sort of like the soundtrack. I'm just not going to go into that, but I think you guys know that. You know, if you watch Goodfellas, they kind of, you know, will intercut mob guys beating each other up with like Frank Sinatra, right? So one of the things I want to show, this is an example from Kung Fu Village, or what was it? Kung Fu Panda. We called it Kung Fu Village at DreamWorks. Kung Fu Panda: Legends of Awesomeness. And my mentor at DreamWorks was the one who edited this with Lane Luaris, who's a really talented board artist. He was an animator on Iron Giant years ago. So he boarded this, and a couple of reasons I want to show you this. First is to see how sound and music together affect timing. And then also there's also just a cool example of what can be done with animatics and how crazy we can go with it. So we're gonna watch two versions of it, and you'll see the difference. So let's check that out.
Oh no! I can't control my butt! Whoops! Holy underpants! Ah!
Okay, so that's the original cut. Now let's check out the cut where we've taken out at the end. We've taken out some of the sound effects and part of the music cue. Part of the music cue is still in there, but we took out some of that. And watch is the exact same timing, just without those things. So let's check that out.
Oh no! I can't control my butt! Whoops! Holy underpants! Ah!
Okay, so exact same timing, but did you see how long the other cut felt without that moment of that sort of trail off of the sound effects and the music? It feels too long, but it's the same exact timing on both cuts. So all that to say is like this is why scoring is important and temp score is important, because when that composer gets, when it goes into post, we need to make sure that the composer's following those things. Otherwise, the cut can feel wrong. So that's hey, sorry, are people having trouble getting into the meeting? Looks like
I think they were just saying that they thought the link in the class link section was for all the classes.
Oh, yeah, dang it. I should have been putting a new one there. Yeah, hopefully they're checking their emails. Okay, sorry. So the idea being, we want to make sure that music affects the timing. So it's good to edit with music. So on that note, I want to show a scene from Up. So the scene I'm going to show is sort of the emotional core of the movie. It's the big moment. There's some really cool things to look at here, and music completely drives this scene. And I just want to talk, we're going to watch through it, and then I kind of want to go through when the piano's hitting, when certain things are coming in and why, and when music's not playing. So we'll go through that real quick. Okay. Probably the second most heartbreaking scene in animation history after the beginning of this movie. so, um, so here's the thing. So in the beginning, right, we have this music swell. It could sound now. First of all, one thing I noticed when I was, watching this. Did you notice? Look at the. I didn't even notice they did this. Look at the way that they brighten up the room, and so that it starts like this. Look at the ending. See that? It goes from this like dimly lit thing, and slowly over time it saturates, and we get this bright color. Really cool. And I'm bringing that up because I think it's cool, and I think it also just plays with the scene, the way that the scene moves from this sort of the dark night of the soul into this revelation that he's having about Ellie, his wife. Her adventure was being married to him and not going to wild places in the world and everything. It was a very, even though they never got to go anywhere, he's realizing now that this whole trip, he's been misguided, and now he's about to be this father figure to Russell. So it's really great. So let's notice just kind of when the music starts coming in again. So he grabs the book. It's quiet up through this point, and when he flips the next page, when we see Ellie, this is the first note. So calm, sweet. He's still kind of in that moment of not fully understanding the purpose of his, of this whole book. Also, the other thing, kind of like what I was talking about with sound effects, notice how like there's, again, the sound effects and the music are competing at any point. There's space for each of them. So, dun, flip. Dun. Look, we're giving everything's got nice space. So like this part I love right here. So dun, dun, right? It's giving that moment for that sigh. That sigh is important because it's his regret that he never got to take Ellie anywhere in the world or like to do big things. So we have quiet again, and just as he's about to close it, now we go into the theme, the up theme. Dun, 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 right? And so now we go through this moment, and it builds as we see their life together, and you're seeing the meaning, and he's seeing the meaning in his entire marriage with Ellie. So we go through this, it builds, this really, and then it goes to this, kind of comes down again, this really beautiful, soft, quiet moment of seeing this picture of Ellie completely content. And then this right here is my favorite part because I think it's such a great way to score this part, is that we have this moment of quiet with Carl to read the note. So the music goes out here and it holds, gives us a minute to read. And I think that's what really hits you hard, is that's when you realize the whole heart of the movie. Then we have a big swell right here. As it comes down, we have those last few piano notes, and then it has a great timing here. Dun, right? Dun. It's kind of even with the music, we're doing that sort of variation in timing. Dun. So 1, 2, 3. So, Tessa said, I definitely tune out music when I have to focus. Yeah, so that moment is just a great moment for us to be quiet and kind of understand what's going on. And I think that you actually kind of feel what Carl is feeling in that moment. So really beautiful way to time out a scene. And again, just pay attention to some of those things when you're working. Don't have the music too busy or competing with things. Give everything space where it needs space. And I just think it's so beautiful how the music carries that scene. So there was a question here. Would the composer get the scene with the sound effects already placed in the scene to avoid clashes? Yes, I have never worked fully in feature, right? The thing I'm doing right now is the first time I've been in feature, so I don't know the exact, I know mostly for composers for TV, they send out the episodes, they kind of reference what they're doing, and they try to match, they don't match the music, but they will write their own music and kind of match the pacing and the timing. So I think certain people work in different ways. I think if you look at E.T., John Williams and Steven Spielberg worked on that, and I think Steven Spielberg cut that ending scene with flying over the moon and all the kids on the bikes. I think he cut that to John Williams' score rather than John Williams scoring to what was the picture. So there are different ways of doing it depending on the director. Does the editor work with the composer? Yeah, so that is part of the job. Like the editor will be in on recording the acting talent or the voice acting talent, and sometimes will be with the composer just to kind of like make sure everybody's kind of meshing and the ideas are all staying consistent. But again, it just depends, I think, on per production. Yeah. So one other scene I wanted to show, and this is all, this is kind of to give myself an excuse to watch a Lord of the Rings clip, which is my favorite. So I think this is one of the most profound scores, or just most impactful scores. And the thing I want to show here is that, we don't want the tones in, like one of the big things when we're looking for score for a scene in an animatic is we don't want the tone of what's happening to clash, right? But there are moments where we can kind of be creative with what's happening. So in the scene I'm going to show here, this is the kind of the climax of the movie, and they're on this ever erupting evil volcano, and evil seems to be winning, and you'll kind of see that in this scene. But notice what the score is doing. The score is calm because it's a really this is the heart of the movie. Very similar to the Up thing we just watched, where it's like our climax is actually going to be this really soft score. So let's just kind of watch this. This is great.
Do you remember the Shire, Mr. Furlong? It'll be spring soon. The orchards will be in blossom. And the birds will be nesting in the hazel thicket. And they'll be sowing the summer barley in more fields. And eating the first of the strawberries with cream. Do you remember the taste of strawberries? Sam, I can't recall the taste of food. No, the sound of water. The touch of grass. I'm naked in the dark. There's nothing, no veil between me and the way of fire. I can see him with my waking eyes. Then let us be rid of it. Once and for all. Come on, Mr. Frodo. I can't carry it for you. But I can carry you. Come on!
Okay. So that score really has like an arc to the scene, doesn't it? The way that it moves is really cool, and there's some really great transitions in there. Where we start off with this sort of like ominous choir thing. We're introducing the conflict. Sam is now trying to encourage Frodo, but then we hit this darkness where that note kind of comes in. It's like, dun, and it goes from a major into a minor chord. And all of a sudden, Frodo's despairing, and then we come into this triumphant thing. But I love that in the midst of all this chaos, and you can hear the volcano rumbling and all that stuff, we're hearing that we're hearing that Hobbit theme. And so it's good to just find those places that it's going to have an emotional impact, even in the midst of chaos. Again, kind of like we talked about in the beginning, where fast cutting doesn't always work for an action scene. Giant big scores don't always work for the climax of your story. It depends on what's going on. So on that note, one thing I just want to say about Actually, you know what? Let's come back to this because I'm actually at a section at the end of what not to do for temp score. So we'll come back to what I was going to say. All right. So remember last week we watched the John Wick clip and the Harry Potter clip. Neither of those have score, and I kind of want to talk about why I think that's a good thing. And so first, let's just watch. We'll start with John Wick. We'll just watch it the way it was cut, and then I went in and I scored both of these scenes so we can kind of see what it. Kind of like what it looks like with score. And you're welcome to disagree with me. I like it better without scoring. That's why I picked those scenes. But we'll kind of, we can put our thoughts and opinions in there after I play the score version, and you guys can let me know. Okay. Okay, there's our original cut. Now let's see what happens if we add score. And I did my best. Like I'm not trying to prove my point by doing it badly. I tried to score it as best I could using tracks from the movies. Okay. Do we have any thoughts or opinions about what adding score does?
It sounds very chaotic, but at the same time, it also works in a sense.
Yeah. I think that's right. I mean, it definitely works. Right? It doesn't feel out of place necessarily, but I think one of the cool things about this, and this is almost just like an artistic choice. It's not like they couldn't have scored this, but the sound design is what's so great about that scene, right? All of all that kind of stuff. And I think when the music comes in, it actually kind of makes it feel a little bit exhausting. Like you're kind of it's trying to keep it going too much with the music. And yeah, it drops the stakes a little bit. Exactly. And I think without the music, you kind of feel like you're in the action, and it feels very it's a great scene, but you feel almost kind of uncomfortable, and you like that because it's the tension.
It feels like nothing bad's going to happen until the music's over, too. He's not going to get seriously injured while in the middle of this musical cue.
Exactly, yeah. It's funny how, and we'll talk about this in the next one too, that the music almost feels comforting. It's like, oh, good, we know what's going to happen. So similarly in this next one, I want to show, I think even more so, this is a really interesting scene because I think again the score works in this Harry Potter clip, but let's watch the original cut and then we'll add the score. So.
And you, I'll be dead.
Okay, so there's our original cut. Sorry, I know it's exhausting to watch these same clips over and over again, but I think this will help just to kind of make a point that I think is important about when you go into temp score. All right, so let's try. I grabbed this music from Prisoner of Azkaban.
And you shall be dead.
Okay, you get the idea. So let's see here. Any thoughts about that? I can see you guys have been commenting in here. Yeah, I mean, like similarly to the last one, I think what happens is like we kind of lose. I think we kind of lose some of the evil that's present in the scene, even though the music has that heaviness and that darkness. There's something about when it's without it that it emphasizes all of the intense sounds that are happening, and then again, it kind of takes us out of it. I also think if you watch in this scene, there's that shot of Harry where the battle's going on and he's just staring right here, right? So without it, I think you get the hopelessness or like sort of the helplessness of Harry right here. He sort of just like doesn't even know what to do. And so I think that shot also kind of puts us in Harry's shoes where we feel that like almost like you're just sitting there not knowing what to do. There's no music going on. It's not trying to like build. It's just we're witnessing this intense battle. This is also like kind of something as Harry Potter fans we've been waiting for, is to see Dumbledore square off with Voldemort and how they're going to do that. Personally, I think they nailed this scene because they had to do something different, right? It couldn't just be like I think the score kind of just like you lose the impact. So all that to say, I think it's good to know when not to score. And the reason I'm making such a big point of this is that I see it all the time whenever we're in animatics where like the entire thing is scored and it gets exhausting, right? It's just too much. The music is making it feel like a giant montage instead of carefully placed moments of music where they need to be. I mean, like, you know, if you watch any movie you watch, any animated movie, like even with that Up clip we watched, there's a whole bunch of dead space before the music comes in, and it's really, that's what makes the impact of that first piano note so heartbreaking. So things to look for when you are scoring or not scoring. So like whenever you watch a movie, just pay attention to when they're using score and when they're not. So these are some things I just kind of wrote down. Oh, actually, wait, I want to show you one more thing. So, and this is actually something I forgot to put in this week's clips, but remember the coyote clips? It's interesting how they use sound effects, or I mean music, because the music is almost like using sound effects in these scenarios. So like, let's watch this one real quick, just like a little clip of it.
Beep, beep.
So, you get the sense that they kind of use it as sound effects almost, right? I mean, there are sound effects in there, but it's sort of emphasizing each motion. So, and that's something I feel like they used to do a lot. Like if you watch like Sleeping Beauty or something, they like whenever a bird is flying, they don't do noise, right? They do like a flute. It was very musical based, and they would only do sound effects if they absolutely needed to do a sound effect somewhere. But usually it was just sort of like it was music that was carrying the sound. So that's something you can, it's sort of like outdated in a sense now, but it doesn't. There's always a place for every style and everything. These are some things I just want to talk about, like when we're looking for score, things to avoid. Unnatural transitions, because like we're dealing with various scores, we're trying to kind of Frankenstein things together. So actually, to show you kind of the way that we go through it, I have to show you what the point I was making was, like, if you look at this, I've cut up this Prisoner of Azkaban score, right? So the actual score looks a little more like this. So there's our full wavelength over to the left over here. And you can see, it has all these like kind of down moments, right? And what I did was I went through and cut up the track and tried to find natural places for it to go, so like I needed to make sure that this was a moment that hit so that we can hear Voldemort's laugh. And then the roar, and then we go back into the music. So I'm using transitions and trying to fade and making sure it sounds natural. So what I'm trying to say there is that like we don't want to have sort of like just one track fade out and another fades in if it doesn't make sense to do that. If they're drastically different, if there's a drastically different rhythm, if they're drastically different keys, try to find those good transition points and make sure it feels natural to what we're doing.
Good question for you.
Yeah.
In that scenario where you're kind of tweaking it and so forth, would they actually go back and rescore it to fine tune it to fit the scene?
Exactly. Yeah. Because like this is just sort of like for like we want to go into like when we go into a screening, right, with our executives, we just want we want it to feel as natural as possible. Because I've seen it before in meetings where like they'll be like, oh, like I didn't like that transition there between the music, and eventually like so we just kind of fine tune it until it has like a good temporary score, and then they'll send the entire animatic off to the composer, who will like kind of go through into whatever program he's using, Logic or Pro Tools or something, and just score everything and smooth it all out. Make sure the transitions work. Yeah.
So
yeah.
I feel like it's easy to look at the scenes that didn't have scores and then like add the score in and be like, okay, this doesn't work. But when you just have the video, how do you decide where the score goes? Or like if the director do temporary like placeholder music, did they already decide where it goes?
No, so like they pretty much leave music up to the editors when it comes to animatic editing, right? We're just going they like a lot of times I'll have my assistants go through and be like, hey, can you guys just find some score? It needs to be this kind of vibe. And then a lot of times like I'll just have them place it in, and then I'll kind of manipulate it to make sure like everything's fading out right and feeling good. But it's all just kind of about, like, so like if I'm in the middle of a scene where a dinosaur is chasing the kids, right? You might not need music, but if I did, I would want to find something fast paced, something like that. It's building tension. And you just find those places to stop. Like if the dinosaur stops and is looking around for the kids, you might want to have the music kind of go down a little bit, and he's looking around. Pick it up when he starts chasing them. Just find those. You kind of want to find those peaks and valleys in the music, in the wavelength, to try to like build that moment out. And and then I think it also just helps you time out the scene and make it feel right.
Do you ever write your own at all, or is it always from something else?
So it's usually from something else. Like, I mean, I do. My brothers and I are all musical. We all study music, and we still do. My brother Hudson he's the one that did the score for the Wario track, but he's actually trying to be in composing. He's a recent grad. But typically, I mean, actually it was kind of funny. In Kipo, we actually got in trouble for this. we had to do. There's a song that Kipo sings in the pilot episode when she's in a guitar shop, and she's like, "Up on top, on my own." So they asked me, "Can you bring in your guitar?" So we brought in my guitar. We kind of made up this song. I kind of got the melody right, got the chords right, and then we went into the studio. And a couple weeks later, I got a note that was like, "You have to fill this out in case that song ever gets royalties, and don't ever do it again because it's against like union policy." So I have written the song once for a show. Yeah. But the
would you say for practicing, not like don't do that for this?
Well, you know, if you're working for a studio, you kind of have to like go by their rules, and like typically they just give us a huge sound library of things to use. But like for that specific instance, we needed some temp. But I mean, we needed like a specific thing. Yeah. So this like.
Usually you would say like maybe finding things that fit is like part of the skill of the job, is to find stuff from other properties that works for the piece.
Yeah, right. Because I mean, like they do it in. You guys can actually watch. There's a YouTube video. There's this guy. I'm not gonna remember his name, but he has a series called Every Frame of Painting. It's a YouTube channel, and one of the things he talks about is temp score, because even the Marvel movies do it. Like the editors will, to get the cut right, we'll get the temp music in there from like Star Trek or something like that, and then send it over to the composer who'll get the right idea. Let's see here. Sorry, I'm going back up. AO said, "And does the temp score come from a library you all have, or is it fair game with anything?" We sort of cheated by ripping stuff off YouTube before. It's whatever we like. One of the projects I was on had a mostly like hip hop score, and it was kind of tough to find. We had to find instrumentals of like old hip hop songs and stuff like that. So I just have to rip that off YouTube. But there is a huge library of music that NBC like will send to, like we can request it and they send it to us for just temporary use. So let me just make sure I'm not missing any other questions. Don't ever pick up that guitar again. Did they smash your guitar? Yeah, it was fun though, because we got to go into like the recording studio. So Karen Fukuhara, who's Kipo, and I just like jammed in the studio until we got the right take. So that was pretty fun. So if you watch the pilot episode, that's me on guitar. Another thing I want to say, be careful about overscoring a moment too. Like this is a tricky thing. Like when we're looking for score, maybe I'll find something that starts to work, right? It's like, oh, that feels good. But then it gets really busy over dialogues. Like the characters are talking and there's a score that's like, dun, 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 and it's like, this isn't going to work because it's clashing and it's distracting. So don't overscore a moment, just find the score. Like I said before, this is the question we keep coming, or the question we keep coming back to is this right for the story, right? Is it right for the scene? Is it right for the moment? So just keep those things in mind when you're looking through that. And then, and another thing I was going to say, it's also really good when we're doing temp score to avoid using scores that are really recognizable. So if we are scoring Jurassic Park or Jurassic World, like I was, and you start hearing in the middle of a moment, dun, 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 that's not going to fly. They're going to hear that and be like, take that out, because it's so recognizable that so like I heard that once on someone added a Lord of the Rings song, and I feel like every score from Lord of the Rings is just too recognizable. You immediately know what it is, and so they'd be like, take it out. So just try to find those moments that aren't super recognizable. Like if you're using a Harry Potter score, try to avoid any of those like little sounds like ding 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 ding. Try to find pieces of score that sort of sound like you've scored it yourself. Awesome. Okay, so we're at 7:48. We always seem to get to that point before I get to the boards. So I just want to show just a little bit of kind of like cutting these boards together. Oh, we have a question. Hold on. Where does the jurisdiction of the composers and the music supervisors lie? Does the editor decide or figure out if they want a pop tune or an OG score? So the editor kind of makes the first pass at music. But we do, things change. Like, so here's an example. This isn't exactly what you're talking about, but it's similar. On another episode of Kipo, on the second episode, there's a moment where two of the characters steal Wolf's staff, and they're riding away on a bike, and they're listening to an old school, kind of like an old school, like 60s, yeah, like a 60s song. And Red and the boards had originally written "You've Got What I Need." Now he was referencing a song that samples "You've Got What I Need," and I didn't know that, so I put in the original cut, "Baby, you got what I need." And so he came in, he's like, "Oh, that wasn't what I was thinking, but that's kind of cool." So we kept it in there, and we cut that scene to a song that sounded like it, that was approved by our music department, and it actually ended up working really cool. So like we'll take that first pass, and like I might have an idea where like, hey, let's put in a song here that's like a soundtrack song, and then the music department will find something that they can clear, and that'll work like that. So yes, I can kind of sing, not really. Okay, so let's jump into, I just want to show the boards for a little bit. So let's just give you a little sample of what my brother did, because I think he did a really good job. Very WarioWare. It's great. And you can see here that he gave us a lot of like really fun stuff to work with, a lot of hits, right? A lot of like little claps and stuff that go to the beat. We've got little spikes here. And then, yeah, he like sped things up, changed the key a little bit, gave us a little like main menu music. So when we're playing with the boards here and we're doing, so let's just say that I found this track online, right? So obviously I had my brother make something specifically for us. But, and this is why I would encourage you guys, if you want the challenge, to look for your own tracks, just because it's a good practice. It is going to be a little bit frustrating because it's, you have to kind of like just go from nothing, try to find video game style music. If you can, try to avoid using the actual Wario music just for the practice. But for now, I'm just going to kind of show you really quickly the way I kind of like will go through and edit these things. So this is what I did for like sound effects and the dialogue, and this is my cut here. So we're going to score this cut. So let's put in, okay, so we got this here. Okay, so we have a nice little, that's good. Okay, so the action starts right there, so I don't want it to go on that long. So I think what we can do is pull in, Sharon has a question. So when movies or shows release albums of their soundtracks, is that not always what's used in the show? Usually the show or movie has bits and pieces stitched together rather than a continuous score. Yeah, so that's a good question. So if you guys saw Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, there's a whole score. Like if you get the vinyl, the Quentin Tarantino made a whole radio play. Like basically, like if you're listening to the radio back in the day, that's what you're listening to. And there are bits and pieces of the songs in there that you hear in the movie, but not the whole thing, right? They don't play full songs of any piece. But it's, like even that up song we listened to, the one that they released, the one they released on the official soundtrack is actually timed a little bit different than the scene, because I think it doesn't, like, they want to kind of keep the album going. So like that scene has a lot of really long that just kind of holds on. So they actually do kind of change the timing a little bit for when they put it on a soundtrack. Okay, so we have this kind of going on a little bit long. And I think when he pops up, that's when I want the music to kick in, right? Dum, 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 dum. So right there, we have that. You can see that little peak right there. So I'm just going to cut that, put that right when he pops up. So right in that board right there. So the track is great. It's a little bit busy for me, I think, just for this beginning. So I wonder if we can find a piece that. Okay, yeah. So a little more. Okay, so right there. So we can kind of cut this piece out like this. So you can kind of like see the little mark in, mark out. And I'm just going to grab a little piece of it and drag this into the timeline, put it where we were going to do that other piece. I'm going to take that out. So let's see how that works. Okay, not quite. Okay, so it works okay, but like we kind of lose, like it kind of gets a little bit abrupt. So maybe what we can do is just drag this out a little bit longer and take the score down. So I just use the pen tool to like drop the volume there. So we just have a little bit of a more natural like fade out, right? There we go. And now I want to keep this going for a while. So right there, I might even, just to like make the score work. Ding, boom. Maybe on that boom, we have his head come back in, right? So, benefit of using the pen tool. Okay, let me show you that real quick because I use it all the time. So like, let's say that we wanted a really easy or like a really well-eased transition. So I'm going to drag this pen tool out. You can get a lot more specific with how well it fades out. So I'll show you the difference. So here are my points right here. Okay, there we go. So here and here. Now, what I can do is I can right click on that and do ease out, and we get the little kind of smooth curve. And then I can ease in here and we get a really, whoops, let me try to. Yeah, it's like Bezier, it's a Bezier for animation, exactly. So you get a little bit more of like a nice and smooth down. So if I didn't do that, and I just took out that and I did about the same length of this, it just has more of a, you can kind of hear how it cuts off a little more. So in this instance, I didn't really need to Bezier it. I just did that because I'm so used to doing the pen tool, but I think the pen tool actually has a lot of benefits just to getting really specific with your sound levels. So the next big moment we have here is that right there, right? So is the hit. And thankfully, it looks like we have on the beat pretty much it hits, but there's a hit. So we can take our hit here. Let's look at this. What's this? Not there. Let's see, where's that? Oh, here it is. This hit. So let's see what happens here. Okay, nice. So I think we can kind of play with this and just take this piece out. And let's see. So I think we can have this build-up happen. Let's see what happens if we just kind of put this where that other beat should have been. So I'm going to line up these beats. Although it's a little bit, that's pretty good. Okay. So let's take this out, and then let's just see what happens here if we... So yeah, like that doesn't quite work because it's not on beat. So if I showed you if we just did those... So that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about with like trying to avoid bad transitions. You know, try to make it on the beat if you can. So we'll keep this here so that it hits. Boom. Yeah. And then we'll find a way to. It's going to be tough to find a little spot here, but let's see here. So yeah, I think if we kind of like take this back and we just kind of have this start right on that moment, maybe that'll work. Let's try that. Nope. It's kind of a tricky part to kind of get right. Let's see. Just kind of have to play with it. So I think you kind of get the idea, though. You just have to play with some of these things to kind of You know, that kind of thing. I mean, that's not the right timing here, but you get the idea to kind of like play with cutting up the score, find those right moments. You know, I think coming out of this moment, the moment we probably boom, and then we kind of go into this moment, right? So he gave us moments to kind of play with that he knew were going to happen. So you just kind of have to find the right place for it, be creative with it. That's the idea. So that'll be the homework this week. Is just put your score in. Try to focus on those things, like, you know, don't overscore the moment. If it's an emotional scene, find the right places to have that. Make sure it's not competing with sound effects or the voices, but everything feels like it should be there, you know? So, awesome. Are there any questions before we jump off tonight?
Yeah. Yeah.
Sure.
So first question, is score in like theme song interchangeable? Are those considered the same? Or
A theme song? Okay, yeah. So theme song, like, you know, obviously, like, you know, Star Wars has a theme, right? Da, 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 da. It's like, but I would say like a theme song would be like, you know, if your show, you know, who lives in a pineapple under the sea, right? That's like a theme song. Early on the early days of Kipo, we had a Janelle Monáe song in there that we just couldn't afford. It was so perfect. It was called Dance Apocalyptic, and I so wanted them to just spend like our entire budget on it. And we eventually went with somebody who actually like kind of gave us a similar vibe to it. But like there are themes in music and then there's a theme song. Your theme song is sort of for like usually for a show that kind of like introduces your show. There's like a credit sequence, or just like introducing, you know, Fairly Odd Parents as a theme song. But like themes in music, like for a score, are themes like that are sort of associated with a character, you know. So like the Force theme and Luke, the Han and Leia love theme with their romance, that kind of thing. So does that answer your question?
Yeah. So it leads into the second part of my question with the score. Are scores usually just one long, almost like soundtrack that you tend to cut up and play around with? Because I was just thinking of, I want to say Incredibles. I think like they have like a certain score and they use the same tempo at times where they slow it down for like slow moments and they speed it up for action, but it's the same exact beat.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I think like, you know, for moments of score, like, you know, like, so Michael Giacchino did both Up and Incredibles, and what he, you know, like he finds those like themes to the music. So The Incredibles has that very like sort of James Bondy sounding spy retro thing going on. And yeah, he'll bring it down for those down moments of just sort of have like a single instrument, like a saxophone or something, playing the theme, and then build it back up when there's an action scene. And it'll be that kind of similar theme. So like it's just sort of like, you know, for us when we're cutting up somebody else's scores that we're using for our, we're sort of doing the same thing. You know, we're still finding those moments. It's just that we have to kind of Tetris it together, right? We're kind of just building the blocks to kind of make it work and finding those moments of transition to work to make kind of build out our scene. So, but yeah, I mean, like they do variation in their score like that. So when do they actually do? So when they do the actual score, that will be in the final product. Do you end up ever having to go back and change the animatic timing to fit it, or is it generally expected that the score will match the timing? So what they do, the way it works in TV at least, is I do my part of it, right? I build out a story that has temporary music, temporary sound effects, final dialogue, and then the picture of just the boards. Then it gets animated. They send back the animated scenes exactly to the timing that we set, that I did it, right? So then a post-production editor puts all of those clips that come back from the animation studio into the timeline and just matches it up with what we do. Then they sit with the director and Rad, or in Jurassic case it was Scott, and they go through and just like decide where they want to like cut for time, right? Because they have to cut down usually like 30 seconds out of the animatic. So after that, because of the way TV works, because it's so like a rigid schedule, after that, they send it to the composer, and the composer composes to that timing. That's like one of the final steps. So that's kind of how it works. And now in feature, it's a little bit more like kind of what you're saying, where things kind of change. Like they change the cut when the composer comes back. They'll kind of adjust things based on what the composer did. Because feature is a little more of a pipeline where everything's sort of coming in at the same time. You're kind of like shifting and changing until you get the right product. Jashelle said, is the pre and post editor typically different people? So it depends. Like right now, I know that certain places like Netflix are starting to do it where they have their animatic editor and their post editor the same person. Personally, I think that's the way it should always be. I've never had the opportunity to post edit unless I was just doing my own personal stuff. Just because it gets lost in translation, you know? And this is not to, I don't mean to throw anybody under the bus, but I think what happens is, in my mind, whenever you go into that phase, you should be cutting out, the first thing you should be cutting out is what story stuff do we not need, right? What lines do we not need? Then go into cutting heads and tails and trying to like fudge things until it gets down to like, down to the right time. But what happens a lot of the time, and what stinks, is that cuts get ruined because there's not communication between the two editors. They just sort of hand it off and then it goes to the next thing. So I like that I'm seeing that they're starting to actually have post and pre-editor, or animatic and post editors being the same person. I think it makes much more sense. And there's also time for it, I think. So, yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, I've got a question.
Sure.
I guess, how do you, with so many different like sound effects and the music and everything, how do you, I guess, go in and like balance those audio levels? Because usually, I guess when I'm doing it like for the homework, maybe it was because I was crunched for time or something, but I usually just go into like I click on the audio and then go into the effects panel for it and just mess with the decibel like slider.
Sure.
And there's gotta be like a better way to do it, right?
There is. Okay. So if you don't have, so check this out here. So here's our Wario track, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you have your clips up, do you have this little line right here across the screen?
Yeah.
Okay. So those are called rubber bands. And that's how, so like they're the left and right bracket tool on your keyboard is what controls it. So watch, like, see how that's going down? Yeah. So that's a really easy way to like change the volume, or going back up the other way. So whenever I'm going through and mixing things, I'm just using that, especially with sound effects, because you really have to balance out sound effects. Like, let's see here. So if I wanted one of those to be, let's see. If I wanted that like rocket sound, I just take that down like this, a little bit less. So I like to do that because, like, again, like I think one of the key things with being an animatic editor is speed. Now, not being too fast, but like being efficient. So like you don't want to spend too much time like doing like making sure exact levels are good, but you do want to make sure like I was saying to Jaden yesterday in the homework review that, kind of like in music, the voice, you need to make sure that's the clearest thing. So start with that as 0 and then mix everything underneath that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I guess, is there a way to do that? Like, can you like select multiple like audio clips on that and then just use the
Yep, if you select multiple ones and you go down or up, it'll at the same time, and it'll do it relative to where they already are. So if one is like here and one's here, it'll go like that. Yeah.
Okay.
So, nice.
Well,
yeah. So, but yeah, I think that's a good question, because I think with sound mixing, like, some editors get really, for lack of a better word, anal about it, where they like, well, there was an editor on Feature who like edited animatics in like 5.1 surround sound, which is insane. It just takes so much time. But I think the good, like, I kind of actually learned this not as much from work, but more from my friends who are in music, which is the voice should always be the most clear thing. Make sure that that's present, but make sure you can hear everything that's happening. So make sure, like, when you're listening, there's the voices here, sound effects, and then the music doesn't drown any of that out. You know, it's just kind of it's a game to kind of like you have to just keep going through and mixing things. So yeah.
Well, thank you for that, because the way that I was doing it just seemed really messy
that
and
takes
kind of
forever.
inefficient.
Yeah. So there's thankfully Premiere. I mean, like, you know, it's just a matter of kind of practicing with the software, but like thankfully Premiere makes a lot of things very easy. So, awesome. Anything else, guys? Cool. Okay. So next week I can't believe we're already at our final week next week. Next week, I just want to watch some more clips, but then I want to spend a lot of the time just doing some question and answer. I want to give you guys a little bit of my story just to kind of, I just have something has been on my mind I wanted to say about like getting into the industry. So we'll talk about that. And if there's anything else you guys wanted to discuss, you know, if you have whatever other questions, anything about editing, about the industry, we'll talk about that next week. So awesome. Thanks so much for signing on, guys, and really enjoying teaching. I hope you guys are enjoying the class. I think after the last week, I'm just going to send you a little bit of like a survey on Brad how to edit, just so since this is my first time, just kind of get some feedback from you guys about what works, what doesn't, that kind of thing. So awesome. All right, guys, have a great week. I'm going to stop the recording now.
Okay. Good night.
Thank you.
Night.
Thank you.